Today we're having a little bit of a double, so it's a white wine and a red wine. Since we're drinking both for dinner, I figured we'd do both. We're staying in a Lebanese theme, except this is really from Lebanon, so 10,000 miles away from Oregon. And this is another Chateau Musar, 2008, this one. Opened it a few hours ago, but it should, we're gonna have it evolve throughout the whole evening. So there's no perfect spot, to get it. Like before, we discussed the other one, the 2010 we had together. This is the third Cabernet Sauvignon, Carignan, and Cinsault. It was released in 2015, which is typically 7 years after they harvest, because it's aged separately, the three grapes, for 3 years. Then they assemble it in 2011, 3 years later, and then they age it together, and then they bottle it. They bottle it when it's ready. They age it for 1 year in the oak barrels. Then they bottle it, and then they release it when they feel it's ready. So it stays in bottles for a few years. Net, this is a 7-year process. It was released in 2015, but it doesn't always work out this way. The 2006, for instance, as a quick anecdote, wasn't released until 2017, 11 years later. 2006, because it just wasn't ready. And they kept tasting it, and every year they say, oh no, we'll wait another year. And apparently they had to wait that long to release. And the 2006 is a little bit hard to find, A, because it's kind of out of sequence, B, because also it was another year where it was very hot, low production, and they privileged probably the export market, so you're going to find it more in Europe and in London specifically than in Lebanon. In any case, 2008 was a very interesting year from a weather point of view. Apparently, it did not rain after February. Basically, middle of February, stopped raining until the end of the summer. No rain at all, which is unusual for the winter in Lebanon. So you had to deal with very low humidity, and also the wines got to be more concentrated and more full, which is not necessarily a bad thing. And they don't seem to be complaining about this at all. As a result, this is a wine that, based on what I've read and based on what people are saying at the winery, could basically last another 30, 40 years. And I know we've talked about it before. I've had 30, 40, 50-year-old Chateau Musar, and they're a delight to have. So I do believe that. But that being said, we've got to drink the wine that we have, and I'm not going to wait 20 years. I have some, maybe I'll wait a little longer on, but this one we're going to have tonight. Just so that maybe you see, I'm going to pour a little more just to see the color as it comes down. It's got that sort of like Burgundian muddiness in it. Not very, it's a dark, but it's more on the brown side. It's a little bit darker than other Musars I've had, and maybe that's because of the fruit concentration. And it's unfined, unfiltered, so you're gonna have this muddiness and this turbidity, so to speak. On the nose, you do have that a little bit of the fruit sweetness, which is more than usual. There's no heat that I can detect, but you also have the gaminess and the earthiness that's so typical of Musar, and the red fruit primarily, I see, and that's probably from the Cinsault and the Carignan. Cinsault and the Carignan, they were very concentrated and very strong that year, as we described. And you got that alcohol that's released as you really stir it, and you can just feel it coming, through the nose, and that's just terrific. Let's taste it. As is typical of Musar, in my opinion, it's really underwhelming on the attack. It doesn't live up to the nose, but then in the mouth and on the finish, it's just really starts working its magic, releasing all these flavors that we described, and staying in the throat, and just keeping that finish that you really is pretty unmistakable. It's got a little bit more savories in it. I think maybe a little bit of coffee, although very, very faint. A little bit of that bitterness, maybe that's the coffee, sort of coffee leather, but the underlying, and this is probably something that's going to be better in 4 hours. So I'm going to decant it and see how that goes. But it is unmistakable. It's a Musar. It's more Musar than the 2010 we had together, because the 2010 had more of that, a little bit of that heat on it. I think we talked about how difficult that year was. And so, there's some variations, but they're all exceptional. And I'm very partial to that, as you know. Cheers.